That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Alright guys, before we get into it, I want to give a couple big thank yous. I know a couple people on Patreon were telling me I need to tweet more, I need to go on Twitter more, and there's a lot of bad Dynasty content out there. I know y'all don't like when I shit on other people producing content, but go on Twitter, guys. Go look at some of the opinions. None of these guys really play in leagues. I'm not going to say none, but a significant portion of them. And yeah, thank you for everyone who's gone out there, interacted. I really like to hear y'all's thoughts because I know y'all actually play in Dynasty leagues and y'all know a lot more than most of these people out here. So I love interacting with y'all and I really enjoy y'all all replying to the tweets. And yeah, but now let's talk about these wide receivers. Let's talk about some guys that I am trying to avoid. I actually just drafted one of them in the most recent Dynasty startup run by the Flock Network on the Flock 10 Patreon League, and it hurt my heart. I tried my very best not to press that draft button. As soon as I drafted him, I went out there and sent a lot of offers out. But the problem with these Flock leagues are a lot of people listen to the channel. A lot of people know what I'm looking at, and a lot of people know who I like and don't like, so they'll just keep on passing on people and forcing me to draft them. Like I had to take Chris Godwin in the 3rd round of this startup draft. I had to take Cooper Kupp and Aaron Jones in the 5th round of this startup draft. And I mean, I don't like any of those players, but to the point where they continue to get passed on. I mean, I just have to go out there, even though I may only have them in one league out of 15. At that point, even if they don't really hit expectations, it's not going to hurt too bad. It hurts. So with Cooper Kupp, let's start with him. And I actually have some very recent, as of yesterday, data of where I would probably rank him the absolute lowest, and to the point where you have to draft him because I was stuck in that situation. Now let's talk about the reason that I'm trying to avoid him at his current cost in most Dynasty startups. And yeah, let's just talk about the overall Cooper Kupp profile. So we know Cooper Kupp came from the 2017 NFL draft class. And yes, I was low on him right from the get-go. And if I would have bought in, similar to a Chris Godwin, when his price was low, it would have paid off. But instead, I went out there, I was stupid, I avoided him, and did not get to reap the benefit of him blowing up and winning people fantasy leagues. Cooper Kupp is now 27 years old, which is very surprising for the fact that he was in the 2017 draft class. I mean, this is the same draft class that has like Juju Smith-Schuster. And Juju's over here at 23, 24 years old. It's just hilarious. Cooper Kupp came into this draft at an extremely old age, which does not necessarily mean a ton, but we have to understand that he's going on the last year of his contract. So when he is going to be an unrestricted free agent, he's actually going to be 28 years old. And we know there's not a good history of unrestricted wide receiver free agents, especially when they hit the market at such an old age. And the reason I believe that Cooper Kupp is not going to actually be re-signed by the Rams is a couple things. At first, I'm going to say this is not necessarily 100% going to happen. I've never heard anybody across any podcast talk about this. But if I'm looking at the facts here, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at the actions by the Los Angeles Rams, because that's the number one thing that teams can tell you. They can go out there and say one thing in a press conference, but they cannot hide their actions. They cannot hide who they sign, who they draft, and who they trade away. And they go out there and they draft slot wide receiver Van Jefferson in the 2nd round of this year's NFL draft, a player that nobody in the Dynasty community is excited about. Nobody really likes his talent. Nobody really likes his situation. And that's because he's an older slot wide receiver coming into the NFL, and he lands behind Cooper Kupp, who's one of the league's premier slot wide receivers. And I'm looking at this, and we have to understand that the Los Angeles Rams have been very poorly managed over the past couple of years. They are in a horrible cap situation, probably one of the worst in the leagues. They have contracts coming up. They really have no draft picks because they continually trade them away for star players, which I'm not going to blame them for. I think that was a fantastic move to push all their chips in the middle while they still had Jared Goff on that rookie contract. But this isn't the Los Angeles Rams of 2 years ago. Entirely different situation. They are low on draft picks. They have no money to spend. Now, one of their star wide receivers in Cooper Kupp is going to the last year of his contract at an older age, and they go out there and they spend one of the premier picks that they have on a player that does exactly what Cooper Kupp does. For me, this kind of screams that, hey, they are not going to go out there and they're not going to be able to pay Cooper Kupp the premium that he's most likely going to demand in free agency, especially with all these teams using so many wide receivers on the field at once. I know there's more wide receiver talent in the league now than there has been for a very long time, but we have to understand team schemes are changing. Teams like to have 3-4 great wide receivers on the field, similar to a Kansas City Chiefs, similar to a Los Angeles Rams the past couple of years, and this is how you win in the NFL in today's age. Now, let's go through and let's talk about Cooper Kupp's actual fantasy production and not try to speculate that he may be on a new team going into his 28-year-old season a year from now. So in 2019, Cooper Kupp had two completely different stories. In the first half of the year, when most people expected him to start slow due to coming back from that ACL injury, he actually lit the league on fire. I mean, he was averaging 21 points per game, which was good for wide receiver 3 in the first half of the season in weeks 1 through 8. But then we see the Los Angeles Rams have a bye, and we see them completely change their offense. I mean, this is an offense that was really struggling compared to what they have historically been able to accomplish under Sean McVay. And they had to switch from their staple of 3 wide receiver sets to going to running more 12 personnel, having both Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee on the field at once. And we see Tyler Higbee explode down the stretch in 2019, and we see Cooper Kupp's production fall off a cliff. He goes from averaging 21 points per game to averaging 11 points per game and drops from the wide receiver 3 to the wide receiver 46. So 2 completely different tales of the wide receiver in Cooper Kupp, but we know that actually Brandon Cooks is gone out of the equation now. Van Jefferson may play a similar role to Cooper Kupp, but I'm not here arguing about Cooper Kupp's talent. I truly believe Cooper Kupp is one of the best slot wide receivers at the NFL level. That's not necessarily the point, though. Going into 2020, yes, Cooper Kupp may score points. Cooper Kupp may be a low-end wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2. I'm not necessarily going to try to speculate and knock it down completely just because the difference between the two is not much. I mean, the difference is going to be about 1.5 points per game, and that's not really going to either swing for you to lose your fantasy league or for you to win your fantasy league. Nonetheless, I believe that Cooper Kupp is going to be a guy that he's going to see his value significantly drop off after this season, regardless of if he hits his marks or not. And I specifically am not too confident just because I love Robert Woods. I expect this team to really try to slow the pace of play down, especially with their poor offensive line play. You really use 2 tight ends more, try to get Cam Akers the ball as much as they can. And yeah, I mean, they were really not able to check the ball down to Todd Gurley last offseason because we know Todd Gurley could not cut. Todd Gurley is complete dust. Now they have young Cam Akers with plenty of juice left in him. I think this team tries to transition over to throwing the ball a little bit less, spreading the targets out a little bit more, especially towards that tight end position. And Cooper Kupp sees a slight drop in value to maybe he has a wide receiver 2 type season this year. And going forward, he's on a new team, and it's so hard to predict how he would be able to do in a new situation at such an older age. And now let's talk about his dynasty value. And really the reason that I'm mainly avoiding him across at least all the flock leagues is, you'll know I go through and I probably participated in about 10 real dynasty startup drafts this offseason. I mean, these aren't mock drafts. These aren't just bum ADP that you find from some random website with the guys that don't necessarily play and they're just doing it for fun. I mean, these are real leagues, people going ahead, putting money where their mouth is, and really showing how they value these players. In about half these leagues, Cooper Kupp's going ahead of Allen Robinson and going ahead of Calvin Ridley. Now, both of these wide receivers I expect to have very comparable seasons to Cooper Kupp in 2020, and their future value is definitely a lot higher. So this is why I find myself not really taking Cooper Kupp at all when he's being drafted as a high-end wide receiver 2. But in the flock 10, I mean, I'm sitting there in the 5th round. Cooper Kupp is on the board. I have no option, really. I have decided that with my team build, it makes the most sense for my potential points to go wide receiver at this pick. And I'm looking at the guys on the board, and really where I draw the line is at wide receiver 19, where I ended up selecting Cooper Kupp. I took him right ahead of DJ Chark and Terry McLaurin. And really, the guy I like to target in this offense is actually Robert Woods, who is a year older than Cooper Kupp. Maybe he sticks around on the team an extra year due to his contract situation. And generally, whether it's through trade, whether it's through a startup draft, you can get Robert Woods at about 3/4 of the price of Cooper Kupp. So that is my go-to strategy. But it looks like, I don't know if it's necessarily just this audience. Y'all know I say it all the time. I have believe that the people who are a part of the flock, not only Patreon leagues, but also just in the general discussion down there in the Discord, they are smarter than the average Dynasty player. I don't know if it's just those leagues, but Cooper Kupp, his value may be correcting. And if you can go out there and sell him now, try to get even like a Julio Jones. I would much rather have a Julio Jones who I know is most likely going to outproduce Cooper Kupp in both 2020 and 2021. And then what's the long-term situation with Cooper Kupp? That's my question. I think it's a lot closer to a Julio Jones type trajectory, at least from where we are sitting now, than most people would expect. So I would rather have what most people perceive to be the short-term option in Julio Jones than the longer-term option in Cooper Kupp. Now, let's go to a player that I know y'all are not going to like. Most of y'all are going to go right away and hit a dislike button on this video because I'm bringing up this player, but I have to say it. I don't really hear it among many other podcast hosts. This is Courtland Sutton. Yes, I am selling Courtland Sutton even after his value taking a small dip after the NFL draft, and there's good reason for this. So Courtland Sutton is currently 24 years old, and I drafted him a ton coming out as a rookie. That 2018 draft class, I've said it multiple times before, but y'all know I play in Superflex leagues, and I was buying up a ton of early second round rookie picks so I could go out there, get a DJ Moore, a Courtland Sutton, and a Christian Kirk instead of paying up for those running backs, which I thought weren't necessarily value at the point. I mean, if I was looking at my process now, I know I would have fallen into the running backs, but I kind of just got lucky and fell into these rookie wide receivers. And a couple of them I'm trying to get out on now. Let's talk about Courtland Sutton's career up to this point and why I believe that Courtland Sutton should be a sell in Dynasty. So let's look at his rookie season, which was only 2 years ago, 2018. After Demaryius Thomas left was weeks 9 through 16. And I think it's kind of unfair to look at Courtland Sutton's first half of the season just because you can't blame him for not getting on the field. I mean, he was playing behind Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. So we can't really knock Courtland Sutton for any lack of production during this time. But after halfway through the season, Demaryius Thomas gets traded. Weeks 9 through 16, Courtland Sutton is the wide receiver 45 in terms of points per game with 10.2. Not bad. I mean, you have to understand that he's a rookie wide receiver. This is something that I think would be projectable for most people. And then Emmanuel Sanders leaves after week 12 due to an injury. And after week 11. So weeks 12 through 16, we see Courtland Sutton actually go to 10.3 points per game, which put him at the wide receiver 40. And this is the first piece of the puzzle that I don't necessarily like. I mean, if we look at this 2018 team, he was getting outproduced by guys like Deshaun Hamilton, and that's not something you want to see from a long-term blue chip dynasty asset. Yet we go into 2019, Courtland Sutton really produces. I mean, at least that's what we've been told, right? I mean, if you go across most Dynasty podcasts, I'd imagine most of them are talking about how Courtland Sutton is a stud who won people leagues in 2019. Guys, let's check the numbers. Let's look at reality. In reality, in 2014, Courtland Sutton averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game, which, yes, this is good for the wide receiver 27. So he was a high-end wide receiver 3 in 2019. Please go check the stats. This is real. Where most people are a little confused is they're looking at the total points category, which we know is highly overrated in fantasy. Anybody who is looking at this total points category and going, oh, look, guys, Jason Witten has been a top 10 tight end for the past 5 years. Guys, that's not how it goes. That's not really relevant whatsoever. Fantasy football is a week-by-week game, unless you're playing in a best ball format, which I doubt most people are. I mean, we're playing Dynasty right now. We are trying to get a week-to-week advantage. And yeah, his total points, which put him as a wide receiver 20, is not too relevant. We have to look at the points per game, and we have to look at the context this was done in. So Courtland Sutton, I mean, he was the only guy in Denver. The other options were Noah Fant, who's a rookie tight end, who actually got on the field just because there was nothing else. And we know rookie tight ends don't produce year one, yet Noah Fant was able to down the stretch. He played with Emmanuel Sanders for 7 games. And then other than that, the leading target getter on this team was Deshaun Hamilton. So guys, this was Courtland Sutton going out there. He was the only option on this team. You can argue that Courtland Sutton was getting all of the defense's attention, which would be a fair argument to make, but I understand. Guys, most people like to look at that. In reality, if you look at what correlates to fantasy points, it's straight opportunity. It's not necessarily, hey, They are looking at Courtland Sutton. He's the only guy they have. Let's take him out of the game. Let's double team him. If you look at real double team rates at the NFL level, it rarely happens. I mean, unless you're prime Antonio Brown, unless you're prime Julio Jones, they are not double teaming you. The defense just can't afford to have 9 men against 10 and to really go out there and shut down the top offense on the other team. It is just a narrative that does not hold true. So we go into 2020 now. They go out and they get Jerry Jeudy. They go out and they get KJ Hamler. And I know most people are not excited about KJ Hamler, but you have to understand, this is a second-round rookie wide receiver. This is the same round that they went out and took Courtland Sutton in. I mean, it is significant. It's significant draft capital. And like I said, with the Cooper Kupp situation, we have to look at how these teams are acting, because their actions is really the only thing that we can gauge at this time of the season to try to determine what their plans are for the future. And they take Jerry Jeudy round 1, I mean, which everybody knows about. Now, let's talk about Noah Fant. I mean, Noah Fant is a guy that I think has massive upside in this offense and really in any offense, because he is a 99th percentile athlete. He's a fantastic pass catcher, and he's a guy that profiles that he can get some volume. So we look at Courtland Sutton's 2020 season and beyond, and there's two possibilities. Let's look at the possibilities for Courtland Sutton having a bad season where he does not meet ADP and he actually loses people their fantasy leagues. What has to happen? A, Jerry Jeudy has to come on and be better year 1, which, yeah, I'm not going to say that's likely. I'll put that like at a 30% outcome. I mean, if you understand probabilities, I'd say that's about a fair mark. I truly expect Courtland Sutton to be better than Jerry Jeudy in at least 2020. I know some people have came out and said Jerry Jeudy's going to take over as the wide receiver 1 year 1. That's not going to happen, but it is a possibility. Now, another possibility is Noah Fant takes that massive step forward, which I believe is also probably sitting at like a 30% chance. What if KJ Hamler is actually better than expected and KJ Hamler can get out there and command a 80% snap share and gets targets from Drew Lock? Or what if the Denver Broncos just want to run the ball? I mean, they go out there, they get Melvin Gordon. I mean, this is a team that has looked to run the ball before with the double-headed monster of Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. Now they have 3 running backs there. And what if they just want to slow the pace of play down and they don't want to feed targets to their wide receivers? Last option is, what if Drew Lock is just bad? I mean, yeah, I'm a supporter of Drew Lock. I want him to go out there and I want him to succeed, but it's obviously a possibility that this second-round NFL quarterback who flashed in an extremely small sample in 2019 is actually not as good as most people are projecting. We have to understand that that is in the range of outcomes. Now, let's look at the range of outcomes where Courtland Sutton goes out there and he's a wide receiver 1. He wins you your fantasy league. What has to happen? This is everything that has to happen. Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler can't come on strong year 1. They can't be a significant producer year 1. Noah Fant can't blow up. He cannot take a massive step forward. Yes, he can progress a little bit, but he cannot go to that elite level. The Denver Broncos are forced to throw the ball. Their defense is bad. They have to keep up with the Kansas City Chiefs and the rest of that offense and go up there and throw the ball 35 times a game. And Drew Lock has to be average to above average. So we're looking at about 1 to 2 things that, if they happen, would tank Courtland Sutton's season. If we were looking at a string of about 3 to 4 things that have to happen for Courtland Sutton to win you your dynasty league. Now we look at where he's going in drafts, and he's actually being selected ahead of Allen Robinson and Calvin Ridley. Both of these are horrendous mistakes in my opinion. If we look at redraft leagues, which is a very useful tool in my opinion, I mean, we're going and we're looking at a FFPC ADP, which if y'all don't know, that's essentially just extremely high redraft ADP. High stakes redraft ADP. I mean, these are fantasy leagues that are $350 to $5,000 to play in. So these people know what they're doing. They're taking him at wide receiver 20. So why is he going ahead of wide receiver 20 in Dynasty by a fair margin if he has 2 high-profile rookies behind him on the depth chart? He has a second-year tight end that profiles to be a stud also on the team. And he has yet to produce more than a high-end wide receiver 3 season. Guys, we are over-projecting Courtland Sutton, and I'm sorry, but go out there, try to trade him straight up for Calvin Ridley. I mean, if you could pull that off, that would be fantastic. Try to go out there, trade Courtland Sutton for Robert Woods in a second. I mean, these are some easy moves you can make to improve your dynasty team and avoid this Courtland Sutton trap. But that's all I got for y'all. Really hope y'all enjoyed the video. Really hope y'all got something from it. As always, make sure you go out there, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Have a great day, guys.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.